in the East, the mindset was very different. People did not have the ego attachment that we have in the West, right? So when you read sometimes about what the great masters had to say about it, it's very hard to actually understand it fully, because they're actually coming from an Eastern background, talking to an Eastern audience, and the mindset is completely different. So it's the right stuff, but it's difficult to access, and that's the whole problem with any of these practices: is to try to find a way of communicating it. It's not really not that difficult. It's us that's difficult, right? We're difficult because from the moment that we're born enlightened, but we lose that progressively during our lives by society, what society tells us to do and the way we're supposed to behave. So we end up not knowing who we are. Now, I think there are more people coming.
I think
Should we wait a few minutes?
I'm going to leave the door sort of a little bit ajar, but I think you can see.
For any of you that were not here last time or the time before, the talks are on YouTube under my name, so you can listen to them, you can access them. And because there's quite a lot of information, it might be useful to go through them slowly, because I recognise that I don't expect everybody to understand everything, because it's complex, and I don't know where each of you are in relation to your individual practices. So it's an idea to listen to it and access it and see, you will, and that way I don't have to repeat it every time we have a class if there are different people that come. So it's there on YouTube, right?
Email addresses. There's a little list here. If anyone wants to ask you, most of you got email addresses on there already, but if anyone wants to have their email address so they know when the next class is and stuff like that, then feel free.
Another thing is that I've mentioned this before, and I mention it at all the classes. There are some small books written by Yogani, who is an American yogi, that's very compatible with these classes, because it's a very simple modern form of learning meditation, pranayama, yoga. He has also a web page with a forum that's very useful, called AYP, Advanced Yoga Practice, and that enables you, if you have particular things that you want to understand, particular questions, that you can find on the forum pretty much anything that you could possibly imagine, either to do with your own practice, things that you want to know, and so on and so forth, right? So it's good. A good practice is based on background reading and also, this sort of thing, learning with a teacher. It's good to do both, because I can't cover everything, but the research with something like AYP will cover it, and it's compatible, so you haven't got then the difficulty of trying to translate it. Well, I'm saying one thing, somebody else is saying something else, which is correct, because there's a whole range of nuances to do with practice. And as we go forward, if you have any questions, please raise your hands, we'll deal with them right away. Or if there's anything lengthy that you want to raise, we can do questions and answers afterwards. So remember Yogani. I also have a Facebook page that's geared to this sort of thing, and it is more to orientate the philosophy. And it's nothing that I write, it's just things that I pick up from other people It's mostly Tibetan Buddhist. There's some Zen, yogic stuff, motivational, but it all puts one into the right frame of mind that the practice is supposed to bring you into. It's more to do with self-empowerment. There's also stuff there that is from great yogis. There's some practice, AYP I put up there all the time. But it's worth having a look at it. Now, we're going to do it this way. First of all, has anybody got any questions? Wonderful. Julian, would you like to do the sun salutations, lead everybody into it, just warming up?
We're just going to do a few sun salutations for those of you who want to, just to loosen us up a little bit.
Has everybody done sun salutations? If not, just... If you want to, you don't. It's not mandatory. It's just good to loosen up. If you haven't done it before, just follow what Julian does. It's really simple.
We come to the front of our mat. Feet together, hands by side. Shoulders back, down, chin tucked in, and the tailbone tucked inside. Okay. So bring the hands up and breathe in. Exhale as we go down. Look up and breathe in. Right foot back. And left foot. In plank pose. Slowly lower yourself to the ground. Cobra. Now, downward dog. A couple of breaths here. Right foot forward. Right leg up. Hang down. Inhale as you come up. And hands down. Okay, again on the left side. Hands up. Down. Head up. Left foot back. Right foot back. Slowly down. Up into cobra. Down. And into downward dog. Left foot forward. Follow by the right. And down. And breathe in as we come up. foot back. And we go left. Impact pose. Slowly lower yourself down. Keep the elbows tight to the body. Breathe in as you come into Cobra. Into Downward Dog. Foot forward. Left. Come up. Okay, one last time. Up. Forward. Left foot back. And right. Slowly down. Cobra. Down dog. Left foot forward. And right. Take a breath, come down. And hands up. Okay. Sit down, nice and comfortable. Most important thing is comfort. Now, we're going to divide this up in this, pretty much in the same way as we did before. We're going to do a little bit about the philosophy, first of all. We'll take each time different aspects. Why? Because at the end of the day, the philosophy is what gives us the fluidity of mind. The object of the practice is to get rid of our rigidity that we build up about our identity, and it's an ego thing. And we have to break that down. That is the purpose of the practice, because we think, the way we are constructed is that we reinforce our own biases because of what we've learned from when we were very young and so on and so forth. So we're not actually looking at things realistically. The things what we want is what we register. And so we're attracted to what we want, we're repelled by what we don't want. And there is a lot of, in Buddhism, it's attachment to these different things. So we don't have that space. Meditation enables us to gain that space. Pranayama gives us the power in that space. But at the end of the day, it's all fine. We're going to do a yoga nidra, but it's what do we do in the yoga nidra at the end of the day that's really important, because we are conditioning our mind to a space of samadhi. But that is supposed to be used for a purpose, and that is where we contemplate different concepts. And they are concepts that are important that we understand. Impermanence is one.
very, very important that we realize that everything is forever moving. We constantly try to grasp onto these things, and we get stressed out because it's all fleeting. Non-attachment, same thing. We're always grasping. That's our nature. And the practice is about breaking that down, because there is no such thing as a fact. Everything is possibilities and probabilities. That's all it is. Even in science, Newton, it was all a fact until at the beginning of the 20th century, quantum mechanics came out. Then it wasn't quite such a fact anymore. So facts are not facts. There's no such thing that is an absolute fact, other than, as they say, death and taxes. But it's all possibilities and probabilities. And when we are able to get our minds around the idea of that, then we realize that there are many, many solutions to problems, many ways of looking at it. Now, we're going to take today 2 particular items, because there's a huge range of them and they're important to grasp. Now, the first one I want to talk about is fear, because we all have, at different points in our lives and on a regular basis, felt fear. We feel fear here in the hara, in the 3rd chakra. This is where fear manifests, and it goes to our shoulders, our neck, our lower back. A lot of the problems that we think are to do with our back, our vertebrae, are actually muscular. So fear makes us contract. Our body contracts. And where does fear lead us? Now, you've got 2 aspects of fear. Because fear can only exist in a relative way, insofar as fear expresses itself relative to the now and the past, or now and the future. In the here and now, there is no such thing as fear. So, if, for example, we are looking back on our lives and there are issues that have occurred and it raises our fear, our whatever emotion that we have, that depression, for example, is on the side of the past. And so it's a relative thing. And on the other side, about the future, is anxiety. But they all relate to fear. But fear cannot exist in the here and now. And the yogic practice is there to break that whole relationship between the now and the past and now and the future down. And the result of that is more contented living, because we are constantly oscillating between things that happened in the past that could have, should have, whatever, and fears and hopes for the future of the way we would like it to turn out. In reality, the past is gone, so we can't do anything about that other than learn the lessons from the past and move on. And the future hasn't happened yet, and however we think it's going to happen, it's going to be different. So we actually learn that there's no point in hanging on to these concepts, but it's fine. I'm saying this to you, and at a logical level, you're all saying, yeah, that's absolutely right. But actually taking that in and living it is a different matter. And that's what the practice is about. It's the fluidity to enable us to really live that, so that we see, not that we intellectually rationalize and bullshit ourselves about the past or the future, but that we actually see the future that way. That, what's the point in worrying? Look, all I can do something about is my reaction to events, but what I can't do is control events. That's beyond anybody's control. But what I can do is decide how I'm going to react to it. Am I going to react to it emotionally? Just, something happens, boom, that's the answer. Or am I going to step back, look at it, and out of the range of possibilities, decide how best to deal with it? I know what I prefer to do. The practice is about taking a step back, looking at it, and acknowledging that we can make a decision about how we handle things that occur to us in our lives in the future. And as far as the past is concerned, learn the lessons of the past, but not drag them forward throughout our lives like a millstone around our necks. So fear is a really debilitating thing, and a lot of it is caused by conditioning from when we're very young. I have 4 children. I've noticed with contemporaries of mine, we all bring up our children, we all think in the best way, we think that we can bring them up. Now let's take, for example, a parent who is overprotective, let's say, with a child. That overprotection, which we think perhaps where we're actually stealing our children from all sorts of terrible things that could happen, we're actually having a reverse effect on our children. We are weakening them. And we are instilling fear in them. Fear of what's going on outside. And when that happens, when we're very, very young, our logical mind has not really been formed. So for us it becomes innate. And we're constantly reacting to these different fears that the way we express and react to fear. So we have to break that down. And that is what the practice is about. It's breaking down our reactions, our automatic reactions. We react because our parents reacted that way often. And it's innate. We've done it from when we're very, very young. So we don't know we don't question it. Now, through the practice, through self-inquiry, we're able to we see ourselves doing these things and we say, well, why am I doing that? And we ask ourselves that question. Now, sometimes there's a very good reason, but at least we're questioning it. And we are trying to find out why we do things in a particular way. And we need to know that, because otherwise we're just reacting to the values of others. So we're trying to discover who we actually are. And one of the things that we find out, particularly through the Buddhist path, because I use the yogic teaching method for the practical side of it, but I like the Tibetan Buddhist method for the philosophy because it's easier to enter. It's also very compassionate, and it's easier to grasp. So it all amounts to the same thing, but I just find it easier to transmit. And so we end up having these concepts within Tibetan Buddhism of, as I mentioned once before, of we all suffer. That's what the Buddha told us. There is a solution to our suffering. We're not different. We're all the same. And the Buddha found the way and told us the way. And it's not really a big deal. It's to do with impermanence, our grasping. It's an ego thing. So what we're trying to do is allow the ego duality to subside. Now, it will always try to resurrect itself. So we have to be aware of what's going on. And the meditation that we do here, which is one where we concentrate on the mantra, is as we stay on the mantra, that is the unconscious mind. Every time we goof off into thought, that's the ego. And we are constant, it's a recognition of the ego and trying to come to terms with it. We'll come on to that in a moment. So is there anything about fear? Any questions that you want to raise? I'm interested in anything that you find that is inconsistent with what you may have heard or learnt, and I will try, if I can, to reconcile it, because there's so many points of view. What I prefer to stay away from is that you've heard something, you've gone down a certain path, I'm saying something that's inconsistent, and there's usually very good reason for it. So I'm happy to deal with it. All right. The next thing on the philosophical side is karma. Right? Now, we've all heard about karma, and I just want to say one other thing about this before I deal with the subject. In listening to this, not just by me, but any teacher, or anything you read, you should try to get into a relaxed frame of mind and look at it more from the point of view of assimilation rather than judgment. By that, because when we judge it and we say, yeah, well, that's consistent, that's not consistent, what do you mean, da, 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 we're not actually grasping what's going on. Whereas, if we allow it to assimilate within us, in other words, no barrier, it comes towards us, what I'm saying, our consciousness will deal with it. It's not, will I forget it? Yeah, no, you won't forget it, it'll be there. Once it's said, every event that has ever occurred in our lives is there. It's just a question of access. So you just have to have confidence that by assimilating, it's there, right? So try to avoid a logical confrontation with what is said to you, whether it's by me or anybody else. Your consciousness will decide whether it's right or wrong, whether it's right for you or not. Now, karma. There is this, people think, karma. It's cause and effect. I do something bad happens to me. I do something good happens to me, right? But that is a real oversimplification of what karma is. And again, it's a philosophical concept that we have to grasp and we have to live. Karma is something that we live. We feel. Now, the first thing that to understand karma is we all have to understand that, and again in Tibetan Buddhism it is at the forefront, everything we say, everything we do, everything we think has a karmic effect. It's not just what we say. What we think has a karmic effect. In fact, in Buddhism, it is said that what we think has 7 times the power of what we say and what we do. Right? And so attitude is very, very important. So we could, by that I mean, we could superficially come across as really nice, kind people. But back there, we could be total shitheads. That is where what our karma is actually, that's the level at which our karma is actually operating. It's attitudinal. It's how compassionate we are towards others. What is our attitude towards others? Do we want the best for others? Right? Now that compassion, which is another whole subject, but I'll just deal with it briefly, is unconditional. It's in yoga, it's called conditional and unconditional love. It's unconditional love, which is that it's not based on a love where if you do the right thing, I love you, and if you don't do the right thing, I don't. It is a state of being that is all-encompassing for friends, enemies, people that we're neutral about. It's an attitude, a stable attitude that we have towards others. And when we realize that others have the same hopes, fears that we do, they may just be, and they're conditioned by their own pasts. Karma has the effect of making us or the understanding karma has the effect of wishing the best for others. Now, if we, let's say, for example, a good example of karma is you've got two people walking down the street, and there are two spiders. One of them is unfortunate enough to stamp on the spider without seeing it, feels regret. That is not a bad karmic event, because that was no conscious engagement. Another person walks down, sees that spider and says, I hate spiders, I'm going to kill the spider. Right? That does have a conscious, that does have a negative karmic impact, because it's attitude, it's intent. That's what it is. It's not the act, it's the attitude towards the act. So there are a lot of things that we can do, and that we do, that may be negative, but at the time we thought they were the right thing to do, not negative karma. Because at the time we thought it was the right thing to do. May not have been, but we went to it, at it, with the right attitude. And that's really important in any practice, that we have a compassionate attitude, that we see ourselves in others. And that's what the philosophy brings up. And it's really important if we are talking about reaching enlightenment or contentment, or whatever you want to call it. You don't have to do it for spiritual purposes, but you just want to live a happy life. To live a happy life, you have to have a compassionate attitude to others, even if they treat one badly. In Buddhist terms, it is called ignorance, which means not stupid, but it means ignorant of the understanding of humanity, understanding of how to react, how to behave. It is a misconception. And there are many people who, because of their upbringing, they've had unfortunate incidents occur in their lives that have made them a certain way. This is what compassion is. It's to understand that element in those people, that nobody is inherently bad. They are ignorant in Buddhist terms. They just don't understand it, right? And some people have a greater ability to get into it and understand it. That's why you're here. Other people don't want to know. They can't open their minds sufficiently to even engage in the slightest way. And they wonder why unfortunate events keep occurring in their lives. If we, in our minds, if we live in a mindset that is constantly negative and constantly fearful, that is what our lives are going to be, because our lives are a mirror effect of what's going on in our minds. If we want a happy life, we have to adopt an attitude that is conducive to that, and then happiness will arise in our lives, and good karma, if you like, will come to us, because it is an attraction. We all have bad luck. We all have bad stuff that goes on in our lives. It's our attitude towards that that makes the difference. Because you can't avoid what goes on in your life. You can be a saint. I mean, if you look, for example, at some of the great yogis, some of the Tibetan Buddhists that came out of Tibet, when the Chinese started occupying it. I mean, these were enlightened beings. They still had bad stuff happen to them, and they went through terrible stuff. And in fact, in terms of Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths don't talk about happiness, they talk about suffering. Because suffering is the, if you like, the stimulus to move us on. That's why the Four Noble Truths talk about removing suffering. Because when we're suffering, we have a very, very strong impetus to do something about it. I'm suffering, I want to get out of this. Whereas if we're happy, we don't. That's why the Four Noble Truths talk about suffering and they don't talk about happiness. Because there's no stimulus in happiness. You just want it to stay. And you're not going to do anything about it. You're just going to, I'm happy, I want to stay happy, and until I'm not happy, I'm happy. So I'm not going to do anything about it. Now I'm not happy. Now I want to be happy. So I've got to do something about it. And that's why the Four Noble Truths in Buddhism are couched in terms of suffering and not in terms of happiness. But happiness is the obverse, because when you remove suffering, happiness emerges. And that is also a result of the practice, because we become more and more contented. Now, happiness, I'm using that in a loose sense, because happiness is actually not the opposite of suffering. Contentment is the opposite of suffering. In other words, that we are at a steady pace of enjoyment of our lives. Because the connotation of happiness is happiness does not last. It's not, the word happiness has suffering on the other side of it. So we then suffer because the happiness ends and we would like it to continue. So contentment is actually a better word for it. Any questions? Have any of you got any experience of Buddhism? You do. You do. Right. So you're probably hearing something a little bit new in terms of, no?
Some of this stuff you're saying has it got to do with Maitri, Karuna, Mudita?
Pardon?
Some of this stuff you're saying has that got to do with Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upeka? Like sympathetic joy for...
Yes, you see, you have it. You have it. It's no different from the yogic, what is stated in yogic terms, right? It's exactly the same. I just happen to use it from my own practice of 50 years because I think it's easier to transmit. Only that. So you can take it and put it into the terms that you're familiar with, right? It won't be any different, right? It's just that I find it easier to teach it and it's my background. So I can teach from that perspective, but it all amounts to the same thing, right? Anything else? No?
I've got a question. You said there were four sufferings, one of the...
Four Noble Truths.
Yes, yeah,
they're all to do with suffering. It is essentially to recognise that we do suffer, that there is a cause of suffering, and that there is a solution to it. And I can't quite remember what the fourth one was, but they are all to do with the fact that there is suffering. There is a cause to suffering, which is the ego, which is what I was telling you before. That is why we suffer. And that there is a solution to it. And this is the solution, which is the practice. So the Buddha, all he was saying, the Buddha just means enlightened one. It's no different from Jesus or any other person who was a teacher. So Buddhism is just a philosophy. But what he was basically saying is, look, I was just an ordinary man, flesh and blood, like everybody else. I just happened, through my own experiences, to find an answer. He was born a prince. He went looking for the answer to happiness. He wanted to find it. He wasn't happy. He had everything. And he wanted to find out. And eventually he found out. And then he said, look, I'm going to tell everybody, show everybody because you can all do it. If I can do it as a human being, everybody else potentially can do it. And there have been many Buddhas, and there are still many Buddhas. All that it is somebody that is enlightened, someone that is self-realized, someone that is completely open. All that means is that we are in that space. When we do Yoga Nidra and we are in Samadhi, we are in that space all of the time. So the practice takes us from not being in that space, being in an egocentric world, starting to open up and realizing that there is another aspect to life, which is seeing the unconscious mind. And that is where the meditation comes in. And it is a practice in opening up the unconscious mind, weakening the ego aspect of our mind, and opening up our unconscious mind, and then putting into it the philosophies. So we start off with a load of bad habits, if you like. We're not all bad or all good, we've got both, but we have, let's say, we are ignorant. We then, and they are habits, because we are creatures of habit, and this is what the problem is, because we form these habits and we can't escape from them so easily. So we need the flexibility of mind to be able to escape these habits. So what we're doing is we are exchanging, if you like, one set of habits, bad habits, for another set of habits that are good habits, but they're still habits, because we have habitual tendencies. Enlightenment is beyond habit. In other words, there is no conscious mind saying, I need to be compassionate, I need to be this way, checking how I am. It is a state of being where you just are automatically. That is what it is. Now, and that is why we need that progression to take us there, because it's not something that we have automatically. Now, those people that are creative, by that I mean painters, musicians, women are more inclined in that direction, tend to have more flexibility in their mind than men. And particularly men that follow very logical kinds of activities. Accountants, I'm a chartered accountant, so I can talk with authority there. People that work with logic have the greatest rigidity of mind. So we're not all the same. Those that start off from a very creative position have a much easier access to this than those people who are very logical, alpha males. They, first of all, are likely to reject it, and then secondly, they tick boxes. They look at whether what is being said to them fits into that matrix, and it's very, very hard to break down that kind of mindset. So people, we have a friend, he was a film director, and we've been friends for 25 years, and for probably 20 of them, he was absolutely not interested in meditation, anything to do with it, didn't want to hear about it. Then one fine day, for no apparent reason, he said to me, look, will you teach me meditation? And I taught him a simple meditation, and for him it was like water, he was like a duck in water. He related to it immediately, and he's been meditating ever since. So it's depending on our attributes, the way we are, will depend very much on how we react to it. But it's a very well worthwhile path, because even if we're not looking for enlightenment, and we're just looking for a greater happiness or contentment in our lives, this practice will give it to us. We will feel more optimistic, we will enjoy our lives more, we will enjoy our relationships more with people, We will see people in a much nicer light, and more important, we will see ourselves in a kinder light, because compassion starts with ourselves. We cannot act in a compassionate way towards others if we do not feel compassion towards ourselves. And the practice is about letting go. And we find out that we're really not bad people. We are, none of us. We're just, we are ignorant because we have certain beliefs that are not true, that we have built up, but we're not bad. So we open ourselves up to understanding that we are good and we see the good in others. And it's not like, this happy clappy type of thing. It is genuinely from within. And that's the hard part, because it's not logic. When you read the books, when you listen to what is said, one tends to look at it from a logical perspective, but it is assimilation. It's to assimilate it, not in a... Ego puts a barrier there on everything that happens. It's questioned. And it is better to allow our minds to just be open to it, and that the mind will judge whether it's right or not. Any questions? I've made you all Buddhists already, see?
Yeah. I've got a question.
Yeah.
I deal with a lot of people, you know that, Malayan therapists I do. But and all my staff, I'm generally who says, your clients are really nice. And I say, well, what about any other clients? And if I do have a client that I feel the vibration is wrong for some reason, they don't come back to me, they'll go to somebody else. But is that right or wrong? I actually I think, directly I said, I don't want to do that client.
There's no, well, first of all, there's no right or wrong, right? It's right for you or wrong.
Compassion then.
But
should I do everybody even if I don't get on with them?
Well, one doesn't get on with everybody. There are some people that one takes to us more than others. And then, you see, we communicate at a subliminal level, right? It's not just what we say. There is a vibrational relationship between us all. And if it is that somebody picks that up, then there is an element of repulsion, not repulsion in the way, but between individuals. So there are certain people we if you believe in rebirth, you may say that we've met before, where we have a strong attachment to. There are others who we may have met before, but we had a bad situation with. But generally speaking, it's because we just do not harmonize at a vibrational level. And it is vibration.
Yeah, I do that.
Yeah, because you see, we think, because we live in such a materialistic world, right, where everybody's basically sitting there saying, well, show me. And it's what you can see with your eyes. That's the world, unfortunately, in which...
A quick fix.
Yeah.
Want a quick fix.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. We don't actually realise that what we are, what I am, what you are, is pure energy. That's all we are. So there's this mental energy, which is unseen energy, which is in a wave form, but we are nevertheless communicating. And our body, which is energy in particle form, and it is in particle form only because it's at a lower level of vibration that enables us to come into vision. So, for example, cats, animals can see certain things, hear certain things that we can't. To us they don't exist, but they do exist. So there's a level of existence that occurs. That it is pure energy. And pranayama, which we're going to come on to now, is what we harness. We are harnessing that energy in pranayama and bringing it into our practice. And it's an extremely powerful energy. I use the analogy before about a magnet with iron filings. The poor iron filings, we all did it when we were at school, didn't we? You know, poor iron filings on a piece of paper. They're random. You put a magnet underneath, and they form an energetic shape because they're drawn in a certain way by the magnet. Now, pranayama, through prana, which is life force, which is energy, pranayama is the harnessing of that energy. Normally in our existence, it's running in a random way through us, because every time we think and we are drawn in an ego sense, our energy is running wild. It's not harnessed. It's like the random iron filings being drawn around throughout the day, and that's why we're tired at the end of the day, because it is not harnessed. Pranayama is a method of harnessing it, and prana rides on the breath. It isn't the breath, but it rides on the breath. It is energy in the same, it is energetic in the same way as food is energetic. It's more energetic, and what we are doing is we are harnessing it through the method by which we practice. Now, it is said that if you take it in yogic terms, that the prana is running in two streams, on the left and on the right, two channels on the sides of the spinal column, called the Ida and the Pingala. You can equate them to the creative and logical forces, if you like, and they are. You can equate them also to the what's it called? The vagus nerve, which splits in two. So our energy is not really concentrated. It's running around our body. Pranayama is a system of harnessing that energy, bringing it through the central channel of the spinal column. Some people will say that it is not actually the spinal column. It's for this purpose, it doesn't really matter. But it is a force that is concentrated through this practice, forcing it up the spinal column to confronting and piercing each of the 6 chakras, and then eventually arising to the 7th chakra. We teach it up to the 6th chakra for safety reasons. So it's an extremely powerful force when harnessed, and that's why it needs to be taught in a responsible way. It's not a matter of the amount that you do, it's the quality that counts. In other words, the posture it's very, very subtle. We start off with it and we do the best we can, we breathe and we get into it. But what we learn is it becomes ever more subtle, pranayama, the science of breath. It is really, really subtle how we can manipulate it and move it in our bodies. And what we need to do, you can read many books on pranayama. Most of them are quite complicated because they come up with a whole range of different ways of doing it. And Yogani, he has taught it, and I teach it, in a way that is called spinal breathing pranayama, which is basically the essence of it. In other words, forget about the 100 and whatever different types of kriyas that you can do. Let's just get the basic thing right, because you can hang all the extra things on it afterwards. Because the most important thing is to get the basics right. Now, the first thing is the posture. So we have to sit with our spinal column erect. It is important, high, tall. it's as if we were a marionette and we were being pulled up in a straight line so that we're sitting tall and straight. Our shoulders should be back so that our chest is large. So just try and sit up straight, because what we're trying to do is bring the energy up. Just try and sit up straight. Imagine that you're being pulled up. Bring your shoulders back. All right? You feel it? That's great. Now that's what you need to be doing. That is the posture. The head should be straight ahead, not up, because some people do it up and it's a strain on the neck. It's not good to do that. Same in meditation. In meditation, the head should be straight ahead, or if you do Buddhist meditation, some people advocate that it's slightly down with a view about 3 meters ahead, which is also fine. So, for those of you, who's had pranayama practice in the past? Who's done it before? You have, right. There are, do you know anything about mudras or bandhas? For those, mudras. A mudra is a seal, right? So when we do this, right, it's an energy seal. It forces the energy to go round like this, right? So a mudra is this, when we're doing this, whether in Christianity or in Hinduism. What we're doing is we're drawing energy to the heart chakra. That's what it is, right? So there are many mudras, and it is the effect of the fingers. Bandhas are locks, which one can also do with a pranayama practice, but they're not. I was going to say, if anybody has any experience of it, there are certain ones that can be applied while we're doing it. So, what are we trying to do? There are 6 chakras. We're not going to get overly involved with actually 7, 6 within the body. And we are only concerned with those 6 that are within the body. As the prana rises through the way that we breathe, the vibration of each chakra is higher. So the first chakra is a material chakra. It's to do with more body. And as we go through each chakra, it's more and more rarefied. So that's why the practice goes up, and they talk about piercing the chakras, and that's not an effort thing. It's a vibrational thing. It's to do with our vibration rising to enable us to bring the prana through the different chakras up to the 6th chakra here. And so we are concerned with bringing the prana up from the base chakra, the lowest chakra, right the way up to the back of the head and forward to the 6th chakra here. Now, before going into the method, I'm going to, the actual process of raising it, let's talk about the method of breathing, okay, for a moment, because it is also important. So we've got the posture, we're sitting comfortably, legs crossed, ideally in this position, okay? Now, the breath, ideally we want the left and right nostrils working equally, but in most people that does not happen. You can check, there is a kriya where you just do alternate nostril breathing, but that is more to equalize the breath, because until the breath is equalized, it cannot go up the central channel, the sushumna. The breath needs to be equalized. So just check that you are breathing through. You can do it. Breathe in. Now, let's say if you're breathing in, be conscious just of the left side of your body. Just hold it here. Sorry, if you're doing it on the right. All right. What are we doing? Left. Okay, left. Okay, breathe in on the left and be aware of the breath on the left side of the body going up, left lung. And out the right. And then reverse it. Just associate them like that and try to get some level of equilibrium between the two. This is something you can do not as part of the practice, you can do it at home, but you should endeavour to get as much equilibrium between the nostrils as possible. You smile.
Yeah, it's only because I got a cold and it's a good thing to do.
Yeah, it is a good thing to do. And
All coming out.
yeah, in fact, when you've done it a bit, you can just bring your attention to the nostril. You don't have to block it. You say, if I bring my attention to my left nostril, I will breathe on my left side to my left nostril. Right? It's just wherever we bring our mind is where the action is. So if you bring your mind to that, that's what will happen. Right? Okay, so we want to try to get some equilibrium between our left and right nostrils, right? We also need to breathe in a certain way. Now, the breath is in three parts. There's the abdominal breath. The abdominal breath we primarily use for meditation, and meditation is all done abdominally. By the way, all of this is always done with the mouth closed, except for one or two types of pranayama, but for this purpose, mouth closed, all through the nose, and meditation. So we've got the breath that's here. We've got, and what happens here? This is all below the diaphragm. The diaphragm is here, right? So what we're doing here, when you were doing Bastrika, right? You were doing, didn't you say to me you were doing pranayama?
Yeah.
Right? Bastrika it's called, right?
Yes, I don't, yeah.
Right. That is to energize essentially the third chakra. So we've got the breath here. Now, we want, one of the things that is important in pranayama is to open up the diaphragm. And the diaphragm is here. Now, if we breathe here, we can't open up the diaphragm. So we need to bring in the breath, but keep a little bit of control over it. So it's not in like this, but we don't allow it to get right out there. So maybe you could do it with one hand here and one hand here, or both hands here. But what you want to do is keep a bit of constraint on the abdominal area and bring your attention to where your lower ribs are. Put your hands here, and your ribs should go out. Put them on the sides. It's better on the sides. You feel it? Going out. Keep your abdomen in. See? What do you mean? Now, this is all stuff that you can practice at home, but it's important because pranayama cannot function properly. The prana cannot rise unless the diaphragm is extended. What are we doing? When we are breathing normally, am I boring you? When we are breathing normally, our diaphragm is like this, and our organs are going up into this cavity. When we do this, our diaphragm is stretched, forcing the organs in the abdomen down and expanding the lungs. And it is so we are exercising the organs, we're exercising the nervous system, we're exercising the endocrine system, and we're changing the pressure. And that is important. So the breath here is important. And the third breath is the upper chest. here. So we breathe up, but we need to breathe, open up and bring it to here, to the shoulders. Now what I'm asking for is a tall order, because that doesn't come in 5 minutes. They're 3 distinct things, and you need to practice them. Right? Just try, and you will find over time, because what usually happens with people that have not practiced it is, because of what I was saying before, fear and all these different things that we have, our muscles are like this. So there is a pressure preventing us from doing this. We need to think about it in an expansive way. Expansive, not like that, like you're fighting against a force. You just need to try to just do it in a dynamic way. Just let it rip. That's what you need to do, right? So that is the basic technique of breathing. Okay? Now, the other thing that we need to do, let me get this right. For the purpose of what we're going to do now, which is a basic pranayama, don't start thinking about everything that I've said to you to get that right all in one go. Right? That is something that's homework. What we're going to do while you're doing the rest of it that I'm going to give you now is you just breathe in as nearly as you can to what I was doing. You just breathe in and out. It's not important whether it's perfect or anything like that. You just need to try to create some awareness. But what we're going to do is, as we breathe in, we are going to imagine a small light source, ball of light, or an ember, or however you want to imagine it. It's not important. At the base of the spine, which corresponds to the first chakra. And as we breathe in, it's going to rise up the spinal cord to behind the head and come forward to this point, the 6th chakra. Right? So as we do it, and by the way, we always start breathing out, so it is a complete breath. Okay, so before we do the breath, breathe out. And then we repeat it. So it's like a up and down, up and down. Now, as we get to the top, there is a real stop to it. It's not like it kind of dribbles away. And there's a start and a stop. So although it is a cycle, it's a cycle from bottom to top, top to bottom. Do you understand what I'm saying? I've exaggerated it, but that's what you need, how you need to be thinking of it, right?
So it's one breath up, one breath down.
Yeah.
And
no retention.
No retention. And when you're breathing down, is it then reverse cycle?
Yes.
I.e. from here down, there down,
From here.
and then to here?
Yes.
That's going down the back, but
Yeah.
the breath itself
Yes.
is from here,
Yeah.
here, and there.
And as you breathe out,
Mm.
put a bit of restriction on. In other words, when you breathe out, don't breathe out to that.
Mm-hmm.
Breathe out to something that is, because there's no dynamism to that, right? So breathe out where there is some, it's a feel that you will develop. Breathe out to some retention, and as you imagine the ember or the light source going down, habitually we think of our breath and it ends about here where the lungs are, but imagine that your lungs are actually go all the way down here and they start all the way here. So the ember is bringing that up and right down. So when you breathe out, don't stop at where the lungs stop. Keep going until you get to here, to the number 1 chakra, right? You all got it? And when you finish, so that you finish on the out breath, always take another light breath in. Right? So that is in essence the cycle. Now, one should initially not do more than 5 minutes of it. It's extremely dynamic. If anybody has had any heart conditions or anything like that, one needs to take it easy and not do it over dynamically. There needs to, because it is very, very powerful. So when you hear people say, oh yeah, I've done 2 hours of pranayama, not healthy, and if it was done, if the instruction was right about how to do the breath and how to do this, you wouldn't need 2 hours of pranayama. 5 minutes is fine. 10 minutes is really max. You get everything out of it. If at any time while you're doing it, you feel lightheaded or you feel nervous or you start sweating, particularly at the head, which can happen, just stop for a second or two and then start again, right? If you find that you are over-energized, bring it down a bit. And that is just stopping. If you find that you're doing 5 minutes and it is actually too much for you, do a bit less. It's a matter of a balance that we have to figure out for ourselves. I can't tell you about that. It's not a thing to overdo. So don't think that doing 10 minutes is twice as good as 5 minutes. It's better to get the 5 minutes right in terms of the way we breathe. And as side exercises, do this business here, because you see, it's impossible to do everything together. It's better to say, today I'm going to do this bit, and I'm going to get that right. And tomorrow we'll deal with the abdomen, and that, and build the practice up slowly. That's the secret. It's to do it slowly and effectively, and then you will find that you will, what starts happening over time is that image that you have of the beam of the piece of light, that light that is rising, you will feel that in your spinal column. You will feel the energy rising and falling. But why? Because the breath is raising the energy and the mind is positioning it. And that's why it's important also with meditation, because the meditation, the practice of meditation enables us to bring a focus, a tight focus, which we can't otherwise because our mind is scattered. This is because our energy and our body is scattered. The meditation is about our mind being scattered and turning it into a laser. So wherever you bring it is where the action is. But you have to remember that the more focused you are, the more you are able to use that focus, the more you need to use it properly and use it well. Because it will accentuate the bad as well as accentuate the good. That's what black witchcraft is. It is having the energy but using it in a negative way. So you build up the energy, but you need to use it in a positive way. Any questions on that? Please.
This one here, can you describe that as an upward breath, and this one is giving the breath with? How do you describe this one? How am I supposed to feel
Well,
this?
you don't feel it in the same way because there's nothing here really that moves as such, right? Here, it moves. Here, you feel it move. Here, it's an awareness, if you like. You bring your attention here, so the breath is going to here, and it keeps going to here. So you just imagine it, if you like, at the shoulders. There's nothing that actually happens there. But you bring it through awareness, you bring your mind to here, and the breath is here. Wherever you bring your mind. So you bring your mind up, you're bringing your mind up to here, and the breath is here. Now, why are we doing this? It's because by doing this practice with the breath, we are actually bringing in 7 times the volume of oxygen into, and prana, into our system that we normally do. We normally breathe very shallow, abdominally, not energizing. This increases the volume hugely, 7 times. Okay? So it's a dynamic exercise. Okay? I just wanted to mention one other thing before we leave this, and then I'm just going to give you some general direction about meditation. And that is the thing to do with, does everybody know what Kundalini is? Kundalini, this is what we're talking about. This is the energy, the concentrated pranic energy that rises through the central channel. That is called Kundalini. And you often see it depicted as a serpent, right? Particularly in yogic terms, you'll see a lot about serpent energy. And it has that flavour. The way it is depicted is that it is a coiled serpent at the first, some people would say the second chakra. And the practice uncoils it, right? And that is, it has a serpent-like quality because it has a vibration attached to it. So the Kundalini has a movement that is serpent-like, and a serpent is a very, very good depiction. Now, it's not just yogic, because when we look at the images that we have, say, of Adam and Eve, what do we see? We have a tree with a serpent around it, and a man and a woman. So what is that depicting? That's depicting exactly the same thing. The tree trunk is the spinal column. The leaves represent the enlightened space. The serpent is the Kundalini, which in Christian terms is the Holy Ghost. And Adam and Eve are duality. Man, woman. In medical terms, what is it called? It's called the caduceus. Does anybody know what the caduceus is? No? Caduceus? Yeah, you know the term, when you look at the medical sign, what is the medical sign? It's a pole with 2 wings on the top and 2 serpents intertwining going up. What is that? Same thing. The serpents going up as they cross are the chakras. Now you ask a doctor about it, he won't know the first thing about it, but what I'm saying is it goes back, it's nothing to do with yoga, it goes back to time immemorial. Yoga is just a means of expressing it, but man has found this eons ago. It's just that this is a system of tapping into it. Now, meditation. Let's just say a few words about that, and then we will do the practice. With meditation, it is all abdominal breathing. Here. Now, what we're trying to do is actually not breathe very much. When we are relaxed, our abdomen will hardly be moving. It's when we are anxious that we start breathing heavily and in a jagged way. When we are relaxed, we're hardly breathing. Our requirement for breath is very, very small. So meditation is about stillness. We want as little movement of the body as we possibly can have, right? because we are trying to get rid of body awareness. Pratyahara, for those that are into yoga, pratyahara is withdrawal of the senses, which is one of the 8 limbs of yoga. That means that there are exercises so that you withdraw, well, the senses, the sight and so on and so forth. Meditation automatically does that, because the object of meditation is that it becomes all mind. There is a lack of awareness of the body. Therefore, we don't want it moving. We just want the minimum breath originating from here. Now, if we breathe from here, it's energizing and we're moving. We don't want that. We want that in pranayama, but we don't want it in meditation. We want it just to be here. And we'll find that actually when we're meditating, we're not even thinking about this, the abdomen is hardly moving. In fact, that often we suspend our breath without even knowing it. It's just mind. Now, why are we doing meditation? Meditation is just a practice. All these are just practices. There's no inherent value. Don't get hung up on a practice. It's a means to an end. That's all it is. Whatever practice. Sometimes you'll hear that people have had these visions and they go off and they often following the visions. No, that's a sidetrack. It's all from mind, right? The whole object is to create plasticity of the mind, flexibility of the mind, a space. Now, I've used this analogy before, and I'll use it again because it's a very good metaphor. If you imagine the sky and all you see is clouds, you've never seen anything other than a cloudy sky. You don't know that above the clouds is the sun. You think that's what it is, it's clouds. And you may have gone for years and years and years and all you've seen is clouds. And then all of a sudden, for some reason, there's a chink in the clouds and the sun shines through. Now you realise that there's something else there beyond just the clouds. And bit by bit, the clouds move and you see more and more of that. And eventually you see the sun above. Now the clouds are always moving. That's our thoughts. Always moving. The sun, which we all see, is our unconscious mind, which is perceived equally by all of us. Meditation is only an exercise in seeing the sun and opening up the clouds. What we're trying to do is get a greater perception of the sun and let the clouds move away. And as we do it more and more and more, the clouds move more and more and more. We still see clouds. So what happens when we're doing the meditation? We use a mantra here. Now, you were saying the other day to me that you do it with the breath. There is a reason why I use the mantra as opposed to breath. It's not wrong to use breath, but it's physical. So it is drawing one's attention still to the body. So mantra doesn't. And that's the only reason. The effect is the same, it's just, in a way, it's a touch more difficult when you're bringing it.
We're beginners. We're beginning the meditation at the beginning of it.
Yeah,
so
it's better to do. Now, the mantra that we use is I am. I am. I am. It's not I am, it's just two syllables. Now, am, amen is a very, it is used in every religion. It is the universal sound, it is important. And a dual sound is important because it has a vibrational effect. So what we are doing is we close our eyes, we still remain sitting erect, shoulders back. Our breath is from the abdomen. And we close our eyes and we bring our attention to the mantra I am. Now initially, we will be saying that as if it was words. So just try it for a second. Bring your attention to your head. Try the sixth chakra. I am. Repeat it. Now, okay? Now, what is happening is that as we bring our attention to the I am, we are not thinking. We are bringing it to a consistent element. With the breath, it's consistent. This represents the same thing. I am. Now initially, we perceive that as if it were words. But as we do it further forward, it becomes less words and it becomes more vibration. Right? And the vibration rises. Now, mantra is the only thing that connects our body and mind throughout all the different levels of consciousness. It's the only thing. So we can say the mantra in terms of speech, we can talk, we can say it, I am, it's physical. We can repeat it as words in our mind. It then becomes a vibration and it rises, and eventually, after you've been doing it a very, very long period of time, and because it's repetition, it's habit, it has to become a habit. That's what we're trying to do, to create a habit. It disappears completely, it merges into the unconscious mind. Now, what happens? We start, I am, and suddenly, did I leave the kettle on? Or something similar. Did I let the dog out? That's what happens. So we notice that we're doing that, and we say in our minds, thinking. So, did I let the dog out? Thinking. Come back, do the mantra. We keep doing that, because our minds will goof off. Keep bringing it back to the mantra. That is meditation. That is the practice. Keep bringing it back to the mantra. What are we doing here? We are weakening our ego mind. We are aware that the first important thing is that we have the awareness that we are doing it. Hugely important that we are saying, wait a minute, I'm goofing off. Now I'm aware that I'm goofing off. That's me seeing the cloud, seeing the sun for the first time, and the clouds, I'm still looking at the clouds, but I want to be looking at the sun. So I'm goofing off, but I want to go back and look at the sun. So, goofing off, and that's normal. It goes on a long, long time while we goof off. But over time, we goof off less, and we are less emotional, we are less drawn to the thought. And we become more the mantra and less the thought. Is that clear? Any questions? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Right. And that is all that meditation is. It's an exercise. Now the next part is the Yoga Nidra. And the Yoga Nidra does not need to form part of your daily practice, although it would be good if you could, but Okay, let me explain. Is anybody really pressed for time here? Because we could run over 10, 15 minutes here, if I do this right. What we're doing is a progression. We start off with pranayama, energizing. We then, it's always done in this order. We then do the meditation, and so we are bringing the energy into the meditation. The meditation enables us to get into the unconscious mind. We then do yoga nidra. We all know what yoga nidra is? Have we all done it? Anyone not? Yoga nidra. It's essentially it is being awake in the dream state. So now I'll take you through it. You lie down, and it's a guided meditation, if you like. All right? You've done it. Right, now, let me explain it, because all this fits together, and it is important that you understand how it fits together. So we do the meditation, which is creating the flexibility of mind. And that is making us more and more relaxed, physically, mentally. We go into the yoga nidra, and that puts us into a space, which is where we're supposed to be, which is samadhi. What is samadhi? Samadhi is a space where we have no thoughts. It's just the purely unconscious mind. No thoughts, right? So that is the space that the mantra resides in. So if that's the space that you're opening up. Now when I give you the yoga nidra, that you will be in that space. But it's more or less induced by me. You can do it yourselves. You don't have to have someone do it for you. You can lie down and imagine your way, or you can get a CD, or you can find some on YouTube. So you can do it that way. Or, if you are experienced, you will find that the meditation will lead you into it, and you don't necessarily need to do it lying down. You can do it seated. So that the meditation leads you into yoga nidra, or samyama, or samadhi, or whatever you want to call it. They're all the same thing, just different words for the same thing. Okay, so we are progressing. So the meditation leads one into samadhi. And that is that groundless space. It's just what should happen when you're in yoga nidra and you're in a guided meditation, is it should just be pure peace, no thoughts. You're just going with it for that period of time. And that is samadhi. Now, it doesn't end there. Because samadhi is a space that you use, and that's where self-inquiry comes in. Now, self-inquiry is essentially what we studied, so we've come pretty much a full circle. Say you want to look at karma, or you want to look at something more personal. You want to look at why you get angry when this happens or that happens in your personal lives. It can be any subject, right? So you will be in that space of samadhi, and you will say you've got a problem that you want an answer to. You will introduce that into that space, and you will find that if you do it successfully, and again this takes practice, you will look at that question, because you've now got the detachment by virtue of the meditation. So you are looking at yourself, if you like, doing it. And you're conjuring up now, why whatever. And you just put it out there. And you will find that because of the plasticity of your mind, there will be a flow. And initially you might find that if it start off using subjects that do not raise high emotion. In other words, don't practice on some really terrible event or some whatever, find something that's pretty neutral to do it with, because you're doing it as an exercise. If it is that you do it on something that is really powerful, you'll be drawn out of it because your emotions will click in and you'll lose the space. But if you do it and you just take a thing, karma, non-attachment, anything, non-attachment, and you go down the track, what does it mean, and you go through it, you'll find that it's like a percolator. Your mind, our unconscious mind, percolates up the answers in terms of possibilities. There's never anything finite saying it's this and nothing else. It'll say there are a whole range of possibilities. There's this, or there's another one, and you will see the answers in terms of possibilities and eventually probabilities. And you may not get the answer first time out. You may repeat it. It may happen when you're walking down the road that you get the answer, because you've set up the dynamic for an answer. And bit by bit, whatever it is will be answered for you in the right way. Not necessarily at that time, but the practice will induce that to happen. So it's very, very powerful, because the mind is then completely open. You can use it the other way as well. So rather than just looking to create, picking a subject, picking something, putting it into the samadhi space, you can just be in that space and things will arise. Because the mind does not, contrary to what people often believe, the mind does not have the capacity of being not at home. That's not what meditation is. That's not what any practice is. The mind is always aware. In fact, it's the opposite. The practice makes the mind absolutely crystal clear and finite. It's not that it disappears and it's like an anesthetic. There's no one at home. It's not like that. It heightens one's awareness, right? Does that come as a shock to you?
No. How would one know that it's not your thoughts and it is your mind?
That's a very good question. And
Do you trust yourself? Or do you believe? Or is it practice? Or is it...
The meditation helps you determine which space you're in, right? Because the space, as we do this practice, right, more, the meditation practice, you find that the space that is, if you like, the thinking space, has got the qualities of confinement and heaviness to it. That when we think, there's that confinement. I can't really describe it, but I think you probably all know what I'm talking about. Do you? When we,
Yeah, it's like a mumble jumble, nothing's clear.
it's like there's a certain edge to it. There's a certain edge to it. It's not a totally open, relaxed feel. It's thinking. The emotion is raised, positively or negatively. But when we're thinking, there's we rise to that, right? And that has a certain quality. The other part, the I am part, the mantra part, is open and totally pleasant. So we start over time knowing which space we're in, and we will be able to conjure up that space and move ourselves away from it. So the question is a very good question. Over time, you will notice the difference of the quality of the space, and it's not something that I can describe it, I can allude to it, but you have to experience it yourself. The quality of that space is that it is unbounded. It has no barriers. It has no qualities.
No emotion.
No emotion. No emotion. Emotion if you like, is a quality of the thinking mind. And when you take that emotion away, you can call it pleasant. It is not like you feel, the enlightened experience, you can describe it as if in one's head, the top of one's head comes off, not physically, and very slowly a whole flock of birds starts fluttering out. Right? The birds represent the thoughts, and so there's pure space left behind. Now, don't get worried about it, because it's not like you're suddenly going to be out to lunch, walking down the street and your mind's gone. You operate in that space. You can operate perfectly in that space. I mean, that's what martial arts are. When you look at... I've used in the past, I think this is probably a good example. Have you ever seen the Zen archers? Have you ever seen the Zen archers? Right? No? No? Okay. Imagine that you've got a target and it's a long way away, like a couple of 100 meters away. Okay? And you've got a chap on a horse, blindfolded, with a bow and arrow, going sideways along to the target over there. He draws his bow, fires the arrow, and hits the centre of the target. Right? That's all the martial arts and that sort of thing is that there is no intervention of the thinking mind. He's not saying, where's the target? How do I hit it? Will I hit it? No. It's just a pure reaction, because he's done it so many times. It's like when you watch Nadal play tennis. He's not thinking about, am I going to hit the ball? Do I hit it? He just does it. Because it's habit. It's a constant habit. And so when we have that confidence built up in our unconscious mind, we just do it. We're not questioning whether we're doing it right, because our motivation is there. We have the compassion, we've been doing that. We're not questioning ourselves, our judgment or anything like that. We're just doing it. Now we get glimpses of it. We can be sitting back, a glimpse of it is listening to music, going to the cinema. When we go to the cinema or we watch a film, we are transported. We're no longer aware of our body. We're not even thinking. We're not thinking about whether we put the kettle on or whatever. We're just thinking about, we're immersed in the entertainment. That's why it's so powerful, because it gets us out of ourselves. And that's what this practice is doing. It's enabling us to do it. You don't have to go to the cinema. I have a friend who's a very, very big-time lawyer. And he goes out running at 5 o'clock in the morning. And he runs because he's busy all day with real high-powered stuff. And that is to get him into that space. Now, you don't need to do any of that. You could do it just sitting there. You don't have to move to get into that space. Sports, all these different things. Drugs, I mean, that's just an artificial way of getting into that space. That's all it is trying to peel away the ego space to get into that nice, pleasant space. But we can do it ourselves, and it's something that we can acquire, and it's not that difficult. It requires 20 minutes a day, ideally twice a day. One should do it in the morning and in the evening. Not get totally hung up on it. If we're travelling or something and we can't do it one day, that's fine, so long as that doesn't become a habit. So generally we should do it. We should try to pick a time of day and a place in our house where we're not going to be disturbed. It's our space. You should try to do it around the same time, but don't get hung up on exactly the same time, because that's just another attachment. We're trying to get rid of attachments. So what we don't want is to get rid of all these attachments and get spiritual attachment. In fact, there was a well-known Buddhist writer called Chogyam Trungpa who wrote a very, very famous book called Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. And that book is exactly that subject, which is that, fine, you go out and you've now reduced all your materialism, your ego mind, but now you've got your ego mind focused on your practice. Oh, I'm the best, I'm really, and all this stuff. It's now the same thing, but it's even worse, because we don't know what we're doing. We're now hung up on our practice and how good we are at it, or bad we are at it, or however we are at it, or are we better than this guy, or are we doing it right? No, we just do the practice. That's all we do. We do the best we can. We try to improve over time. It's not a race. It takes years. I have been practicing for 50 years, and I'm still learning pranayama. There are still aspects of pranayama because it is so subtle, right? You never ever master it to the degree that you can say that you have it perfect. There's always a nuance that you can pick up. Meditation is different because it's taking you to a destination. But for practical purposes, the whole thing is you're moving forward. Doesn't matter the speed. It's just that you're moving forward. That's all. In your own time. Some people do it quicker. Some people do it slower. That's nothing to do with how well you're actually doing the practice so much as your karmic baggage as to how well or otherwise you're doing it. So you just take your time, and the most important thing is that you enjoy it. That's what you have to do. So now...
Sorry, this guy with the arrow, yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, how present is he really? Because he's blindfolded and he does this arrow shooting because it's something he's done so many times and it's just in your system. So it's an automatic thing he's doing. But what about this thing about being present?
He is present. He's absolutely present in the moment. He is not thinking.
If something happens around him or whatever, that would take him out of it, wouldn't it? Because you're aware of, you're being present as being now, isn't it? But you're still aware of what's happening around you. But he still needs his focus, so totally focused, otherwise he wouldn't hit that thing.
Good question. He's not aware of what's going on around him. He's purely in the space of the practice of being on the horse, pulling his bow and letting the arrow go. And it's an automatic thing. Yeah. Nothing else is in his awareness. Purely that. And it's habitual because he's done it so many times. It's a question of habit. So he knows, because he's failed so many times, he's probably done it 100,000 times. And his teachers have said to him, no, you're hitting it too early, too low, too high, the pace of the horse, all that has got to, until that is absolutely martial arts. The moment with any of these things, whether it's sports, art, martial arts, whatever of these things they are, life, the moment you think and you question, you're putting a time lapse in there. So you can't do it. Because between the time, that's why I said to you before, you should just assimilate what I'm saying, because otherwise there's a barrier, a time lapse. As soon as you start bringing it in as a thought and questioning it, because that moment has already gone, there's actually another moment. Do you understand? You don't?
Yeah. It's probably because I brought something else into that I like.
Can I say something? I don't play golf, but I was playing golf. 10 metres away, on the side of a hill, was the hole. And I was there with my nephew and I said, this ball's going to go in. Walked up to the ball, hit it, that thinking, up the hill, in the hole.
Yeah.
Didn't think.
That's what I'm talking about.
I would never do it again. But I knew at that time.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it, just walked up to the ball and hit it.
See, I'll tell you, maybe the archer is a bit confusing. Let me try something else. I'm a bit worried about the light here. Do you think we can turn on a little bit of light but not too much?
That makes more sense, that's present, and that's
Yeah.
intuitive, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas the other guy is doing it
Yeah,
like
that's
He is,
good.
he's totally present in
Exactly.
what he's doing. He's totally
Except for the yoga nidra,
focused
that's-
on what he's
Without
doing.
it
Everything
being-
else
Well,
is
let's-
necessary.
Let's
This
just
is
leave it
what
on for the
everybody
moment.
else is more automatic. This is more present.
Well, it amounts to the same thing. I mean, I'll give you an example. Probably before most of your time, there was a tennis player called Bjorn Borg. Bjorn Borg, yeah, right? And there was a big thing. There was a big thing about Borg at the time, because they started talking about something called the inner game, right? The inner game. And the inner game was essentially, you watch the ball. That's all you do. So you're not interested in what you're doing. You're just watching the ball. Now the effect of what is actually happening, and it's the same with your golf, and it's the same with the archer, is time has the effect of slowing down, right? So as you're watching the ball coming towards you, it is as if it were in slow motion. And because you've been doing it so many times, like the archer, you have confidence that you will react to it. You are not thinking, how am I going to hit that ball? Because in the time, if you were to do that, the ball would have gone before you hit it. It's automatic. And eventually, that's physical, and we can see that in a physical sense. But it's also mental. And that's where we're heading with the practice, that we just go through life, if you like, on automatic, just knowing that all these different aspects of how we act, how we conduct ourselves in life, are just right, because we've examined them over time, non-attachment, impermanence, law of karma, compassion, all these different things. And I mean, this takes a lifetime, and most people never attain it. But that's what the goal is. And that's, in the enlightened state, there is no ego. The ego has been vanquished. It's just the extreme of the practice. So you start off with the clouds. It's like there's never another cloud. Because while there is just the slightest bit of ego left, it will always try to resurrect itself and become more. It's always trying to hide. But at the point where the ego fully disappears, it cannot come back. And that's what enlightenment or self-realization is. That's all it is. It's like no clouds. Ever. So you have to have a system within yourself that doesn't question and be confident that the outcome's right. We are always worried as to whether we're doing it right. Is that, all this stuff, we're questioning everything. And this is going through life with no questions. We just know that we're doing it the right ways. Yeah, I know it sounds a bit far-fetched, but it is attainable. Okay? Now, we're going to do the pranayama. Okay, we're going to go through the practice, and we're going to end up with the yoga nidra. So, now do you all remember what I said to you about the pranayama? We're going to do 5 minutes of it. We're going to sit up straight, shoulders back. Imagine that light source from the base of the spine up to the back of the head and coming forward and down again. And we're going to breathe from the abdomen, restrained, try to open the chest and up to the top. But just do the best we can with it. The most important thing is the light going up and down at this point. Okay? So. Right. So, now we're going to do 5 minutes. Let's start now. Breathe out. Start. Draw the breath up. It's more like a syringe where the plunger is drawing it up than dragging it up from the bottom. The out breath should be slower than the out in breath as well. Just relax. Sit up straight, head up. One more round. And finish opening your eyes. Now, you need to do it energetically. You should hear it. The energizing part is the in-breath. And we breathe out, it tends to be slower. Okay, but give it some guts. Right, now. We're going to do the meditation. I think it would probably be better if we turn the lights down for that. Okay, now, for the meditation, have you, we're going to go straight into the Yoga Nidra afterwards. Don't worry, I'll show you how to do it. But sorry, can we close that? Yeah. Yeah, if anybody wants a blanket, if you're feeling cold. Does anybody want a blanket? You can use it also to drape over you for Yoga Nidra. So if you think you want to use one for Yoga Nidra, let's get it now. It is getting a bit chilly, so it might be an idea. Anybody else want a blanket? Okay, now we're going to do 5 minutes of meditation. You can do 10 at home. You should try and do this, the pranayama and this, every day. And ideally what you should do is just some light asanas, yoga postures. If any of you do the postures, just do a small balanced group before. But if you don't do that, do the pranayama and the meditation. Right. So remember, again, we sit up straight, shoulders back, no slouching. Abdominal breathing. We're going to do 5 minutes, and we're going to use the mantra, I am. That should just keep repeating itself slowly. If it's going very, very fast, consciously slow it down, because it'll slow you down as well, right? So it's not just that the mantra, if the mantra is speeding, it's because your mind's speeding. So you can slow it down a bit, but in normal circumstances you shouldn't try and control the mantra, it should just be, okay? However it is, it is. So we're going to do 5 minutes. And you'll hear the symbol. I'd like you to lie down before Yoga Nidra. Lie down on your back. Legs slightly apart. Arms apart. Downward, you're not quite straight. Your left leg a bit more that way. That's better. Everybody should be straight. Just examine, bring your heads up, make sure you're all in line. Okay? Right. Okay. Now I want you to bring your attention to your toes. Toes, relax. Feet, relax. Ankles, relax. Lower leg, relax. Knee, relax. Thigh, relax. Now bring your attention to your hips. Hips, relax. Abdomen, relax. Chest, relax. Now bring your attention to your fingers. Fingers, relax. Hands, relax. Wrists, relax. Forearms, relax. Elbows, relax. Upper arm, relax. I want you to bring your attention to your shoulders. Shoulders, relax. Now bring your attention to your vertebrae. I want you to imagine that your vertebrae are sinking into the floor one by one. Vertebrae, relax. Neck, relax. Throat, relax. Jaw, relax. Tongue, relax. Cheeks, relax. Ears, relax. Now I want you to imagine that you're in a forest. The forest has tall trees, the sunlight coming down in between the tall trees, and flowers on the ground. You're walking slowly through this forest, enjoying everything that you see. You're walking very slowly forward. See all these beautiful trees, all different types. The sun coming down between them. You keep walking forward. And eventually you find that the trees become less. It starts opening up into a meadow. Beautiful green meadow, far as the eyes can see. In front of you is a strong light. You're bathed in that light. It consumes you completely. You remain in that light, just enjoying it. You remain there until you hear the symbols, just enjoying it. Now I want you to take a deep breath. Turn onto your right side. And in your own time, come up into the seated position. Everybody okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've run over a bit, I'm afraid, but
It's worth it.
well, I prefer delivering it not feeling like I'm under a lot of pressure, you know. Thing is, I rather hope that we can somehow get a regular group, because it's better if I don't have to spend most of the time explaining the basic practice, because there are so many other aspects. It's not like you learn it and you go away. There's a lot to it. And if there are certain, if people are getting on with it, it starts becoming what I would like to get is a regular group together. And one can move down the track with all these, particularly the philosophy, but also to broaden the practice, and also to hear your experiences, because that's really important too, about how you get on, how it's working for you.